Hello and welcome to Marks & Clark's Blurred Lines podcast series. I'm Robecca Davey, Chartered Trademark Attorney and Senior Associate at Marks & Clark, and throughout this series we'll delve into intriguing and evolving subjects in the intersection of fashion and intellectual property for 2024. Our discussions will span diverse topics such as the rise of NFTs, the expansive world of the metaverse, and the pivotal role of AI in shaping the industry. Each episode will feature insights from a spectrum of experts in the fashion realm, along with special guests from within Marks & Clark, providing unique perspectives on these compelling themes. So without further delay, let's embark on this week's episode.
Welcome to Marks & Clark and Spatial Aids webinar. Today we have a very special guest for episode 5, and we're going to be talking about XR and fashion. And we're here with Marco Marchesi. I hope I said your name right. The CTO of The Fabricant. Very exciting. So we'll start off with a round of introductions. Since I'm speaking, I can go first. My name is Joh Orengo, and I'm the CEO and founder of Spatial 8, and we help brands get into the future metaverse through using XR and spatial computing technologies to help solve business problems.
Hi, I'll go next. My name's Robecca Davey. I'm a Senior Associate and Trademark Attorney at Marks & Clark, who are a global IP firm, intellectual property firm. I have a broad practice and a broad range of clients with a lean towards clients in the fashion sector, and I help brands protect and enforce their IP rights.
So today our special guest, if you would please introduce yourself a bit. I said a little bit, but I'm leaving the rest for you.
Yeah, I'm Marco. I'm the CTO of The Fabricant. The Fabricant is one of the leading digital fashion companies. The first one they introduced actually the concept of digital fashion, especially in the blockchain. My background is a mix of creativity and technology. Has been in all, let's say, the most exciting fields in the innovation, from quantum computing to brain computer interfaces in the past. I have a quite long track of project in augmented reality, virtual reality, and AI. So excited to speak with you today.
Excellent. So, like I said, we are talking about XR and fashion, and we'd like to start with like a bit of an intro of what these emerging technologies are. So, Marco, if you could please tell us, from your perspective, what is AR and what is VR?
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting how there are many concepts and terms in the area of reality. It reminds me when I did my PhD dissertation, one of the first pages was about this, what we call reality continuum, the Milgram continuum. So basically, it's a spectrum between what we call reality and what we call virtual reality. So in the middle, there are other keywords like mixed reality, augmented reality, extended reality. Some of them are a bit more marketing side, while other ones are more technical. So basically, what we call virtual reality is about replacing the entire visual input with something that's been generated digitally. So that's something that you see from a headset that you need to wear, and basically what you see is completely done by generated by pixels, so it's completely fully rendered. And if you have a play, for example, with Oculus headsets, you're gonna see virtual reality. Augmented reality is a term that's been used for mostly for mobile devices. It's about you overlap a layer of digital pixels on top of the frame that comes from your camera or mobile. That's what is called augmented reality. So you are augmenting the reality that comes from the camera with some digital content that in general needs to adhere with the perspective and most also now with the lighting condition, shadows or occlusion. There are many effects they had reality on that. Of course, it's one of the most interesting progress on that field. There are other terms like mixed reality, for example. There's more kind of niche in the sense like used more when we talk about headset, for example, like HoloLens or Magic Leaps. Headset that are intended to overlap a layer of digital content, but you are still using a headset rather than mobile. In that sense, the mix comes from the fact that you intend to add more realism on the scene and like mix and merge more and fuse the reality, the physical reality, what actually is generated by the machine, the device itself.
Marco, what are we seeing fashion companies do, and how are we seeing this play a role in the fashion industry? I think that's like so interesting. I think your insight would be so fascinating.
It's been a while that companies are trying to use and they are experimenting with all these reality terms. I remember a few years ago, I worked, for example, with a lot with HoloLens device with Microsoft, partnering with big brands. What they want to do is, for example, like preview a new item, a new shoe in a digital space without actually manufacturing the shoe, or like garments as well. In that sense, the idea was more not to wear the fashion, but more to preview. So something that you see in front of you, but digital, with the idea that, of course, because you were able to wear the headset or using the mobile camera, you were able to move around the physical environment and see the garment in the space, located in the space, with the perspective of the space and the lighting of the space. It's been interesting with a lot of constraint, because of course the constraint was not just the photorealism of that, but also the fact that the camera was cropping constantly the view of that. So it creates an uncanny valley to have things that they look almost real, but not in a way, and constantly breaking this let's say condition was not ideal for the purpose to make it more production ready, more mass for the masses. But the things that they progress a lot in the last, let's say, probably more 5 years was the idea of a virtual try-on. Virtual try-on means the idea that you can actually wear the garment in augmented reality or virtual reality, more in augmented reality. So the idea is that, and it's mostly done with computer vision, machine learning, deep learning technique. So the idea is that from the camera, there are algorithms that they estimate your body pose, and based on that, they are able also to decide where to put the garment on each frame. This one also adding what is called cloth simulation. They are some of the most difficult, let's say, problems in computer vision in general, cloth simulation and body estimation, because you can imagine are prone of errors in so many different ways. And there are a few companies that have been working on this field for a while. Most, let's say, probably the most famous and popular is Snap for doing their lenses, their filters. They constantly progress that field, but also other companies that they rise on that. They are doing more independently, like 010. They are more focused on the fashion side of things. So the idea, of course, is you have a garment, you want to wear digitally, you want to see yourself wearing that garment, and using this solution, you are able to see yourself wearing the garment in real time. The solution that are being used are in general mobile, so devices like iPhone, Android, or also AR, what they are called AR mirrors. So you go to a shop, to a store, and you are able to stand in front of what looks like a mirror, but actually what it does is projecting yourself, but augmented with the garment, with the digital garment. It's pretty interesting solution that we apply as well, more for museum than retail. Of course, the idea for retail is, of course, a lot of photorealism. It's super important for the quality and the accuracy, because if it's not accurate, a brand, they may say, yeah, but it's exactly not the same, and may affect the decision about, of course, purchasing the item.
So,
does it do sizing? Sorry, just being
No, go ahead.
totally. Does it do sizing? Would it size you and say you needed to buy a size whatever, or does it not do that? It's like,
the size. Yeah, I get it. That's the
Sorry.
size. Another difficult problem to solve, because actually one of the biggest challenge was about how you are able to size exactly, to be sure there is fitting the person. And that's something that reminds me, one of my first AR mirrors, when we prototype, not with the fabric I am in the past, a few years ago, one of the biggest sportswear brand, and basically we have to show our mirror with the shoe, with the shoes, but actually the shoes that the person was wearing they were bigger than actually the digital shoes. So you see the overlap of a smaller shoe on a bigger shoe. It was absolutely, of course, not ideal in terms of perception of that. So it's a really big problem, because, of course, all these digital garments, all these digital accessories, they need to fit the person. Otherwise, it will not make any sense. It will be like not of course, not the right solution if you want to help the customer to buy something, because it's not going to have the same experience they actually buy trying physically.
Yeah, I've actually spoken with some companies that are looking to solve that problem of trying to fit. Yeah, very, very complex.
Yeah, there are startups just doing that,
Right.
really just focus on the size problem. Yeah,
Right.
I think now is getting easier. They are more sophisticated and more. The works is almost there, almost done on that side.
I wanted to go back a bit. The examples you've given are more like, I guess, customer-facing examples of how fashion brands are using XR technologies. Can you say a bit more about how they might be using the technology, like internally, to solve some problems within the company, or in the creation process, or anywhere along the value chain?
Yeah, it's manufacturing is super important, because the idea is, if you are able to render photorealistic content, of course you are able to preview things before even manufacturing, and that solves a lot of problems in wasting material in production time, because it makes it even easier. There's something that I worked in the past about that, doing configurator, because you were able to share the same experience across the world, across the globe. Literally, maybe there is a designer in the US prototyping something, they can immediately share the knowledge, share the experience with someone in Europe or in Asia at the same time. And that's something that, of course, has been used often by brands. Probably all brands are on that, in the sense like they prototype a lot using these virtual tools. The problem again with using virtual reality is about the photorealism and augmented reality as well, because of course imagine fabrics when you see a distance you can simulate easily, but if you want to really go close, the physicality of a material is a completely different thing, and you are still missing the touch that is super important when you are actually wearing, and that's something, me working on the digital space, I recognize even more, because I see, of course, there is a gap on that between the physical item and the digital item. But the good thing, the big advantage on the digital item is the fact that you can experiment a lot. So you don't need to take risk in manufacturing, for example, by adding some material that you are not sure, or some detail on the garment that maybe is not going to work. You can preview digitally, and then when you are sure, you can use it. There's also another component that is about there is what they call in the digital space. There are many projects where they actually sold the digital item first to actually understand the demand of the physical item. So you buy the digital item first, with the idea that with the same price you can get also the physical item later. In that sense, you have at least a full control of the numbers, of the amount of production that you're doing, and of course you save a lot of fabrics, a lot of unused garments. Consider that 30% of the garments of all the fashion is not used even once. 30% is a lot. Tons and tons of materials, they are wasted and they burn completely. They are completely thrown away without having been used. And that's something that we are really, of course, is part of the mission from the beginning of the fabricant, to try to evangelize, educate about the importance of digital item, not just as a creative tool, a creative solution, but also because it solves a concrete problem on waste. And
are there any companies that you're looking at that are doing this phygital thing very well?
I nothing yet at mass scale, let's say. It's more, we are also on that we are, for example, the Fabrica as well is interested on the digital space, because even if we are focused on the digital side of that, we are always constantly talking, and we are in plans of doing with brands the physical part as well. So I think Tommy Hilfiger, for example, did with their campaign with us, and there was also the physical item. But the cool thing on that campaign was actually Tommy Parallel, that it was called, that it was actually, they want to experiment in this way. They have the physical item, they have the clone, the digital clone of the physical item for the same customer, but also they create a completely more experimental digital item that was not bound and not constrained by the physical version. And I think it's something super interesting. So the idea is, of course, we recognize that you cannot you cannot have the creative side of a digital item is way more free than the physical one, because the physical one has constraint of gravity, constraint of the body, while the digital one is completely free. So we recognize that, and I think it was super interesting to see this kind of 3 different versions, where actually you provide the person with the actual clone, but also with a more creative version of that. And there are a lot of independent labels and brands that are doing that, the digital one, and there are also big brand that are working more on that. Also for accessories, for example, I mean, LVMH is super interested on that, Gucci, but it's a really, but of course, a really small collection. On scale, I think it's still like something that is challenging, because of course manufacturing on that will be still something to solve properly.
Can you give us a couple more examples of how the fabricant has used AR or VR, and who you've collaborated with on these projects?
Yeah, we have 2 interesting campaigns. One was with the Weekday, and with Weekday we actually did sunglasses, and I love that because first of all, because actually the physical sunglasses look like digital items as well. So we kind of cross in a cross realities, because they actually for once we have the physical item looks like digital and digital item look like physical in some way. We exactly if you try the augmented reality lenses that we made for that, it looks exactly like the physical one, because I think we kind of made a lot of research on the materials to be sure that really the digital render look like what you got in the physical space. I think it was quite interesting that. And I really enjoy that. And it's something where you see kind of the importance on that, because when you have this kind of situation, you really appreciate the fact that you can preview first, even before going to the store and try that. You can really do at home any different situations. Then we have also we collaborate with HoliznaRAPS, that of course is always in the pioneering new trends, HoliznaRAPS in fashion, and it was super interesting because with them we had like jackets that we decide to have they basically create a collection with different brands. In our case was more, we were doing the jackets were actually augmenting itself in the sense that the jacket was not just a digital jacket, but there was also some visual effect. They had a lot of, let's say, storytelling on that. It's something that I like, is to see where we have, it's not just, you realize how much the digital fashion is not just about reproducing some wearable item, but also adding a lot to that in terms of meaning. And that's something that we really enjoy to work, because we see the big difference between doing just a physical jacket and doing the digital one. We're working with now with new brands. It's gonna be super interesting because we are going to work with some iconic items, and with some reinterpretation of that. Is going to be interesting, because I think there are a lot of opportunity to kind of reconstruct reproduce the physical fashion to new ways, and that's something that always excited to see.
So can you say a bit about how you see the value of AR VR for fashion companies? Like what's worth pursuing in the field?
I think, yeah, as I said, the idea of one of the things, the easiest one is, let's say, is previewing the item, and both for the brands themselves internally, but also for the customer. And that's something that is seeing some tangible results, because of course there's been proof. I think it's 40% more engagement with using AR than just having in your e-commerce website. So that's a proof that actually having in the e-commerce solution AR solution where you can actually preview, he had more interesting and engage more the customer, because of course they can understand how they fit, how they look like, how they move. Of course, assuming that they are simulated accurately enough to show the value of that and the kind of the materials, and all the kind of the lighting. Because of course we know that it's super important that the fabric can always work for the quality side. And augmented reality is a field where it's still challenging that, because all the augmented reality in general has the boundaries of the size of the content. It cannot be so much photorealistic as we want. We're all really struggling, really push the device and the machine at the limits of that. That's why in general virtual reality should be more promising on that. I still believe there's still a long way to go on virtual reality. for two reasons. One, because virtual reality still not prove the mass adoption that we need for the fashion industry, at least. I think it's still more gaming a lot, gaming side in terms of audience. And in general, of course, it's not something that you can, for example, present in public spaces. Virtual reality after COVID had really a huge impact about that. So now it is more difficult to present as an experience that you can share in a store, and it's more home-based, but still if you want to prove quality for fashion, of course, it means to add a lot of content on a virtual reality scene that is still problematic because it's still it's challenging to render all the quality together. So, for example, now that with virtual reality you will be able also to see yourself if you own on a virtual mirror as well in a virtual environment, but adding the photorealism that is needed for yourself is gonna be challenging for the let's say performance of the device. So definitely something that we are more interested on the AR. Of course, we are more interested even more on the AI side. I think how to replace even the whole augmented reality with the AI as well. But it's something still where we are working secretly about that.
I mean, from a fashion consumer and a consumer in general, I think it's so exciting. But if I take that hat off for a minute and put my legal hat on, I just think it raises so many questions. But I think for rights holders, brand holders, and content creators, I do think they need to bear some things in mind. This switch over from the physical goods to virtual goods, I think just means that you have to take lots of considerations. And I think for rights holders and your big brands and any trademark or brand owners, I think they really need to consider the application of their mark in the virtual world, and if they can protect and enforce other people who are trying to use their brand in the virtual world. So I think that kind of takes a bit of strategic thinking around that to make sure that they're kind of really, their growth strategy is really in line with this, emerging market. I think if you've got a massive brand, like your Hermes and your Nike, then they might be able to protect their brand for virtual shoes in the virtual world. But I think some of the smaller brands might struggle to have that reputation to do that. So I think that kind of takes into consideration. And for creators of VR, AR, XR content, I think they really need to consider whether they have the consent of the brand owners to use their marks in this virtual space. And in some instances, it could just be reaching out and getting consent. But oftentimes it could be in the form of a license agreement or things like that they might need to consider. So I think that's really an important consideration for content creators. And I think finally, and one of the most important things for content creators to be aware of is who owns the IP and the rights in that content that is created. I think that definitely needs to be built into any contracts that are made so that the output is really clear on who can enforce the copyright in that augmented reality or VR and who owns that. I think that does get a bit blurry where AI is used to create things sometimes, and that's a whole nother can of worms. But I think that has to be built in to any contracts that are kind of drafted and set up at the beginning of projects. But I think it certainly does throw out some such interesting things. I mean, I've got these two hats where I'm so excited as a consumer, but then in the legal field, I'm just what does this mean? It really is an interesting space. I don't know whether you've seen any of this kind of the legal implications in your work, Marco, or whether it's not got that there yet for your guys. But
no, I mean, of course, we are super conscious of that because we were working also with the blockchain. They had another layer of complexity on the IP, on the ownership of items. I think it was interesting. For example, I know that one of the use cases that is interesting for us is when we do remote rendering, so cloud rendering. We recently did a fashion show using Cornerstone lens. So basically the idea was we recreate a complete virtual environment, but it was not navigated using virtual headset. So it was not actually virtual reality, but was a fully digital experience where everything, the fashion show, the users were actually avatars on this let's say computer graphics environment. You can say like a game style environment was based on Unreal Engine, and in that sense, of course, it add complexity, because when you do this kind of experience, actually the user is not actually owning anything, in the sense that what he sees is like a TV show, and a TV show is rendered directly from remotely and just projected and transmitted to the local machine. In that sense, of course, there are a lot of implications about, okay, but actually I'm not owning a copy on that experience, on the virtual experience. Is more like exactly like watching a movie in the same field, but it's also interactive, so actually part of that. So I think the digital space had a lot, and the interactive space especially had a lot of challenges on understanding who's owning what. Of course, for digital fashion, is part of that, because in general, that's why we try to cut short and adhere on the fact that we have all our digital items in the blockchain, so we know the actually a token, let's say the item, is owned by the user. At the same time, there are implications about, okay, but who's owning the design? Who's owning the brand? Who's owning all the other part that, of course, users are free to modify, but there are also certain terms. So all these licenses is your problem, of course, a lot, but we work together in the sense, because we have constantly in touch on that, constantly in the loop, updated about this field, because it's super important, and we take seriously about that. Ownership is really one of our pillars in terms of mission and vision, and we see like as a gray area where it's still not defined yet. And of course, there are different countries with different perspective about that. There's even more problems and challenging in a world where actually we see the digital world as a flat surface, where actually it's not.
Yeah, it's a nightmare. Link, don't worry, it's not you. It's gonna be fine.
That's great. Yeah. So I guess we're getting close to the end of our interview, so to speak. I think this has been very interesting. Let's see if I can summarize some of the points. Okay, so we have AR and VR and everything in between. Some of them are more marketing type terms, and some of them are actually ways of viewing reality, and how we as people and consumers and creators kind of merge and play with these different layers. And then, of course, when it comes to fashion, these technologies can be used internally in the creation process, manufacturing process of fashion and accessories, but then also facing towards the customer, so they can preview and try on accessories or clothing. But of course, that opens up other challenges, like algorithms that would able to like snap the clothes according to a person's figure or shape or what have you. And then of course you were also talking about different fabrics and how to get them as realistic and lush as possible to really, if a brand is trying to create a physical version that the customer can like, get as close to it possible and look at all the threads and the fabrics and the materials and this and that. And then we also talked about some of the examples of the things that the fabricant is pushing. Like you guys are obviously cutting edge, and how you're using these technologies. And you also have some secret things that I'm looking forward to hearing about more in the future. and kind of seeing what you guys are doing. But yeah, I think, and then of course there's the legal implications. You know, when you bring this blockchain layer and you're talking about creating digital assets, and then how an owner of these digital assets can actually utilize them. You know, then you get into all this area where they keep Becca up at night and their whole team trying to figure out how to explain this stuff to their clients, and then how to work through it so that everybody, so it's fair for everybody. I think I covered everything. Please,
I definitely think you did, Joh. And I just want to
Okay.
say, Marco, you've been so fascinating to talk to. I think the work that you guys are doing is really, really cool. And as someone that spends a lot of money and time in looking at fashion and buying fashion and experiencing fashion, I'm so excited to see how this evolves. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been such a great chat, and yeah, we really appreciate your time.
Thanks for inviting us.
Thanks for listening. For more information on all of these topics and to listen to all the episodes so far in the series, make sure to visit our Fashion Hub on the Marks & Clark website. You can find the link in the bio of this episode. See you again next time on the Blurred Lines podcast.